The Swahili language or Kiswahili is a Bantu language and the mother tongue of the Swahili people. It is spoken by various communities inhabiting the African Great Lakes region and other parts of Southeast Africa, including Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Mozambique and the Democratic Republic of Congo. The closely related Comorian language, spoken in the Comoros Islands, is sometimes considered a Swahili dialect. Although only around 5 million people speak Swahili as their mother tongue, it is used as a lingua franca in much of Southeast Africa. The total number of Swahili speakers exceeds 140 million. Swahili serves as a national or official language of 4 nations, Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. It is also one of the official languages of the African Union. Some Swahili vocabulary is derived from Arabic through contact with Arabic-speaking Muslim inhabitants of the Swahili coast. It has also incorporated German, Portuguese, English, Hindi and French words into its vocabulary through contact with empire builders, traders and Slavers during the past 5 centuries. History, origin. Swahili is traditionally regarded as being the language of coastal areas of Tanzania and Kenya, formalized after independence by presidents of the African Great Lakes region. It was first spoken by natives of the coastal mainland and spread as a fisherman's language to the various islands surrounding the Swahili coast. Traders from these islands had extensive contact with the coastal peoples from at least the 2nd century AD and Swahili began to spread along the Swahili coast from at least the 6th century. There is also cultural evidence of early Zaramo people's settlement on Zanzibar from Dar es Salaam in present-day Tanzania. The African population of the island holds the tradition that it is descended from these early settlers. Clove farmers from Oman and the Persian Gulf farmed the Zanzibar archipelago, slowly spreading Islam and adding a few words to Swahili language and building forts and castles in major trading and cultural centers as far as Sofla and Kilwa to the south. Mombasa and Lamu in Kenya, the Comoros Islands in northern Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, and Barawa to the north in southern Somalia. Demand for cloves soon established permanent trade routes, and Swahili-speaking merchants settled in stops along the new trade routes. For the most part, this process started the development of the modern Swahili language. However, the spread was hampered during the European colonial era and did not occur west of Lake Malawi, in what was then called the Belgian Congo, and is now Katanga province of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, thus making it a secondary rather than a primary language in that region. The earliest known documents written in Swahili are letters written in Kilwa in 1711 CE in the Arabic script. They were sent to the Portuguese of Mozambique and their local allies. The original letters are now preserved in the historical archives of Goa, India. Another ancient written document is an epic poem in the Arabic script titled Utendi Watambuka. It is dated 1728. However, the Latin script later became standard under the influence of European colonial powers. Colonial period. After Germany attacked the region known as Tanganyika for a colony in 1886, it took notice of the wide prevalence of Swahili, and soon designated Swahili as a colony-wide official administrative language. The British did not do so in neighboring Kenya, even though they made moves in that direction. The British and Germans both sought to facilitate their rule over colonies where the inhabitants spoke dozens of different languages thus the colonial authorities selected a single local language which they hoped the natives would find acceptable. Swahili was the only good candidate in these 2 colonies. In the aftermath of Germany's defeat in World War I, it was dispossessed of all its overseas territories. Tanganyika fell into British hands. The British authorities, with the collaboration of British Christian missionary institutions active in these colonies, increased their resolve to institute Swahili as a common language for primary education in low-level governance throughout their East African colonies. Swahili was to be subordinate to English, university education, much secondary education, and governance at the highest levels would be conducted in English. One key step in spreading Swahili was to create a standard written language. In June 1928, an interterritorial conference took place at Mombasa, at which the Zanzibar dialect, Kiunguja, was chosen to be the basis for standardizing Swahili. Today's standard Swahili, the version taught as a second language, is for practical purposes Zanzibar Swahili, even though there are minor discrepancies between the written standard and the Zanzibar vernacular. Current status: Swahili has become a second language spoken by tens of millions in 3 African Great Lakes countries, Tanzania, Kenya, and Congo, where it is an official or national language. The neighboring nation of Uganda made Swahili a required subject in primary schools in 1992 although this mandate has not been well implemented and declared it an official language in 2005 in preparation for the East African Federation. Swahili, or other closely related languages, is spoken by relatively small numbers of people in Burundi, the Comoros, Rwanda, northern Zambia, Malawi, and Mozambique, and the language was still understood in the southern ports of the Red Sea and along the coasts of southern Arabia and the Persian Gulf in the 20th century. In the Guthrie non-genetic classification of Bantu languages, Swahili is included under Zone G. At the present time, some 90% of approximately 39 million Tanzanians speak Swahili in addition to their first languages. Kenya's population is comparable as well, with a greater part of the nation being able to speak Swahili. Most educated Kenyans are able to communicate fluently in Swahili, since it is a compulsory subject in school from grade 1 to high school and a distinct academic discipline in many of the public and private universities. The 5 eastern provinces of the Democratic Republic of Congo are Swahili-speaking. Nearly half the 66 million Congolese reportedly speak it, and it is starting to rival lingua as the most important national language of that country. In Uganda, the Buganda and residents of Buganda generally do not speak Swahili, but it is in common use among the 25 million people elsewhere in the country and is currently being implemented in schools nationwide in preparation for the East African Community. The usage of Swahili in other countries is commonly overstated, being widespread only in market towns, among returning refugees, or near the borders of Kenya and Tanzania. Even so, Swahili speakers may number some 120 to 150 million people. Many of the world's institutions have responded to Swahili's growing prominence. Methali, that is wordplay, risk or copyright or suggestive puns and lyric rhyme, are deeply inscribed in Swahili culture, in form of Swahili parables, proverbs, and allegory. Methali is uncovered globally within Swa rap music. It provides the music with rich cultural, historical, and local textures and insight. Name: Kiswahili is the Swahili word for the language, and this is also sometimes used in English. The name Kiswahili comes from the plural Sura-yen-il of the Arabic word Zar-yen-il, meaning boundary, or coast, used as an adjective meaning coastal dwellers. With the prefix ki, it means coastal language, ki being a prefix attached to nouns of the noun class that includes languages. Phonology: Swahili is unusual among African languages in having lost the feature of lexical tone. Vowels: Standard Swahili has 5 vowel phonemes, and the pronunciation of the phoneme stands between International Phonetic Alphabet, U, and O. Vowels are never reduced, regardless of stress. The vowels are pronounced as follows: is pronounced like the A in father, is pronounced like the E in bed, is pronounced like the I in ski, is pronounced like the O in cord, is pronounced like the U in rule. Swahili has no diphthongs. In vowel combinations, each letter is pronounced separately. Therefore, the Swahili word for leopard, chui, is pronounced, that is, as 2 syllables. Consonants, notes: the nasal stops are pronounced as separate syllables when they appear before a heterogonic plosive or represent a separate morpheme, and prenasalized stops are decomposed into 2 syllables when the word would otherwise have 1. However, elsewhere this doesn't happen. Nzi has 2 syllables, as does nendigo. The fricatives in parentheses, thdhkhgh, are borrowed from Arabic. Many Swahili speakers pronounce them as /szh/, respectively. Swahili orthography does not distinguish aspirated from Tanui consonants. When nouns in the N class begin with plosives, they are aspirated in some dialects. Otherwise aspirated consonants are not common. Some writers mark aspirated consonants with an apostrophe. Swahili Islander emerged for many speakers, and are often both realized as alveolar lateral flap, a sound between a flap t and an L. After a nasal prefix, L becomes and W becomes. Orthography. Swahili is currently written in a slightly defective alphabet using the Latin script. The defectiveness comes in not distinguishing aspirated consonants, though those are not distinguished in all dialects. There are two digraphs for native sounds, ch and sh. C is not used apart from unassimilated English loans and occasionally as a substitute for K in advertisements. There are in addition several digraphs for Arabic sounds which are not distinguished in pronunciation outside of traditional Swahili areas. The language had previously been written in the Arabic script. Unlike adaptations of the Arabic script for other languages, relatively little accommodation was made for Swahili. There were also differences in orthographic conventions between cities, authors, and over the centuries, some quite precise, but others defective enough to cause difficulties with intelligibility. Vowel diacritics were generally written, effectively making the Swahili Arabic script an abugida. And were often conflated, but in some orthographies was distinguished from by rotating the kasra 90 a degree, and from by writing the dhamma backwards. Several Swahili consonants do not have equivalents in Arabic, and for these often no special letters were created, as they were for example in Persian and Urdu. Instead, the closest Arabic sound is substituted. Not only does this mean that one letter often stands for more than one sound, writers made different choices as to which consonant to substitute. Some of the equivalents between Arabic Swahili and Roman Swahili are, this was the general situation, but conventions from Urdu were adopted by some authors. For example, to distinguish aspiration and from, U3/4 O section gazelle, U3/4 O section roof. Although not found in standard Swahili today, there is a distinction between dental and alveolar consonants in some dialects, and this is reflected in some orthographies, for example in U-florin U to the first ukita to meet versus U-florin U okitaya to be satisfied. A K with the dots of Y, U plus or minus, was used for CH in some conventions. This KY is historically and even contemporaneously a more accurate transcription than Roman CH. In Mombasa, it was common to use the Arabic emphatics for CW, for example in O-micron U Swiswiwi and U-florin U O U kitty Y head. Word division differs from Roman norms. Particles such as ya, na, si, kwa, ni are joined to the following noun, and possessives such as yangu and yako are joined to the preceding noun, but verbs are written as two words, with the subject and tense aspecta mood morphemes separated from the object and root, as in Alai Nyambia he who asked me. Noun classes. In common with all Bantu languages, Swahili grammar arranges nouns into a number of classes. The ancestral system had 22 classes, with most Bantu languages sharing at least 10 of these. Swahili employs 6 classes that usually indicate singular nouns, 5 classes that usually indicate plural nouns, a class for abstract nouns, a class for verbal infinitives used as nouns, and 3 classes to indicate location. Nouns beginning with M in the singular and Y in the plural denote animate beings, especially people. Examples: mtu, meaning person, and mdu, meaning insect. A class with M in the singular but me in the plural often denotes plants, such as mti tree, miti trees. The infinitive of verbs begins with ku, for example kizoma to read. Other classes are more difficult to categorize. Singulars beginning in ki take plurals in vi. They often refer to hand tools and other artifacts. This ki/vi alteration even applies to foreign words where the ki was originally part of the root, so vital boo books franca to boo book. This class also contains languages, and diminutives, which had been a separate class in earlier stages of Bantu. Words beginning with u are often abstract, with no plural, for example utoto childhood. A fifth class begins with n or m or nothing, and its plural is the same. Another class has g or no prefix in the singular, and takes ma in the plural. This class is often used for augmentatives. when the noun itself does not make clear which class it belongs to, its concords do. Adjectives and numerals commonly take the noun prefixes, and verbs take a different set of prefixes. The same noun root can be used with different noun class prefixes for derived meanings: human mtoto child, abstract utoto childhood, diminutive katoto infant, s, augmentative toto big child. Also vegetative mti tree, s, artifact kitty chair, s, augmentative jiti large tree, kijiti stick, s, ujiti tall slender tree. Semantic motivation. The Ki/Vi class historically consisted of two separate genders, artifacts and diminutives, that were conflated at a stage ancestral to Swahili. Examples of the first are kisu knife, kitty chair, chombo vessel. Examples of the latter are katoto infant, from toto child, kitawi frond, from tawi branch, and chumba room, from yumba house. It is the diminutive sense that has been furthest extended. An extension common to diminutives in many languages is approximation and resemblance. For example, there is kijani green, from jani leaf, kaikaka bush from cheka clump, and kivuli shadow from uvuli shade. A little bit of a verb would be an instance of inaction, and such instantiations are found: kiafo death, from the verb far to die; kio to nest, from ota to brood; trakula food, from kula to eat; kivuko afford, a pass, from vuka to cross; and kolimia the Pleiades, from limia to farm with, from its role in guiding planting. A resemblance, or being a bit like something, implies marginal status in a category, so things that are marginal examples of their class may take the Ki/Vi prefixes. One example is chura frog, which is only half terrestrial and therefore marginal as an animal. This extension may account for disabilities as well: kailamo a cripple, kipafu a blind person, kaziwi a deaf person. Finally, diminutives often denote contempt, and contempt is sometimes expressed against things that are dangerous. This might be the historical explanation for kifaru rhinoceros, kingugwa spotted hyena, and kaiboko hippopotamus. Another class with broad semantic extension is the M/Me class. This is often called the tree class, because mti tree, s, is the prototypical example. However, it seems to cover vital entities which are neither human nor typical animals, trees and other plants, such as mwichu forest and mtimo millet. Supernatural and natural forces, such as Mwezi moon, Mlima mountain, Mto river. Active things, such as moto fire, including active body parts. And human groups, which are vital but not themselves human, such as Mji village, and, by analogy, Mzinga beehive cannon. From the central idea of tree, which is thin, tall, and spreading, comes an extension to other long or extended things or parts of things, such as mwamvuli umbrella, moshi smoke, msumari nail. And from activity there even come active instantiations of verbs, such as mfuo metal forging, from fua to forge, or mlio a sound, from lia to make a sound. Words may be connected to their class by more than one metaphor. For example, mkono is an active body part, and mto is an active natural force, but they are also both long and thin. Things with a trajectory, such as mpaka border and mwendo journey, are classified with long thin things, as in many other languages with noun classes. This may be further extended to anything dealing with time, such as mwakaya and perhaps mshahara wages. Animals which are exceptional in some way and therefore do not fit easily in the other classes may be placed in this class. The other classes have foundations that may at first seem similarly counterintuitive. In short, classes 1-2 include most words for people, kin terms, professions, ethnicities, etc., including translations of most English words ending in a. They include a couple generic words for animals, mnyama beast, mdudu bug. Classes 5-6 have a broad semantic range of groups, expanses, and augmentatives. Although interrelated, it is easier to illustrate if broken down. Augmentatives, such as joka serpent from nyoka snake, led to titles and other terms of respect: bwana sir, shangazi aunt, fundi craftsman, caddy judge. Expanses, Ziwa Lake, Bond Valley, Taifa Country, Anga Sky. From this, mass nouns, Maji water, Vumbai dust, Kor charcoal, Mali wealth, Maridawa abundance. Collectives, Kundi group, Kabila ethnic group, Jeshi army, Daraja stairs, Manioya fur, feathers, Mapes a small change, Manazi weeds, Jongamilipede, Marimba xylophone. From this, individual things found in groups, Jai stone, Tawi branch, Wayflower, Tunda fruit, Yegg, Rapacha twins, Geno tooth, Tumbo stomach, and paired body parts such as Jicho eye, boa wing, etc. Also collective or dialogic actions, which occur among groups of people, Nino a word, from Kuna to speak. Paigo a stroke, blow, from Kipiga to hit. Gomvi a quarrel, Shori advice, plan, Kosa mistake, Jambo affair, Penzi love, Ibu answer, Agano promise, Malapo payment. From pairing, reproduction is suggested as another extension, but these generally duplicate one or more of the subcategories above. Classes 9 a Euro 10 are used for most typical animals, Ndaj bird, Samaki fish, and the specific names of typical beasts, birds, and bugs. However, this is the other class, for words which don't fit in well elsewhere, and about half of the class 9 a Euro 10 nouns are foreign loan words. Loans may be classified as 9 a Euro 10 because they lack the prefixes inherent in other classes, and most native class 9 a Euro 10 nouns have no prefix. Thus they do not form a coherent semantic class, though there are still semantic extensions from individual words. Class 11 are mostly nouns with an extended outline shape, in either one dimension or two, mass nouns which are generally localized rather than covering vast expanses, bush porridge, wali cooked rice, broad, ukita war, ukuka fingernail, upan side, wavu net, wayo sole, footprint, way fence, yard, utio winnowing basket, long, utambi wick, utp stripe, utabao, ubavu rib, ufar crack, unaiwala hair, from a hair, singulatives of nouns, which are often class 6 in the plural, unoa a feather, by a grain of dust, ushanga bead. Class 14 are abstractions, such as utoto childhood and have no plural. They have the same prefixes and concord as class 11, except optionally for adjectival concord. Class 15 are verbal infinitives. Classes 16 are Euro 18 are locatives. The Bantu nouns of these classes have been lost. The only permanent member is the Arabic loan mahali place, s. However, any noun with a locative suffix ni takes class 16 a Euro 18 agreement. The distinction between them is that class 16 agreement is used if the location is intended to be definite, class 17 if indefinite or involves motion, and class 18 if it involves containment, mahali pazarai a good spot, mahali kizarai a nice area, mahali muzarai. Verb affixation. Swahili verbs consist of a root and a number of affixes which can be attached to express grammatical persons, tense, and subordinate clauses, which require a conjunction in languages such as English. Verbs of Bantu origin end in the indicative. This vowel changes to indicate the subjunctive and negation. In most dictionaries, verbs are listed in their indicative root form, for example kata meaning to cut chop. In a simple sentence, prefixes for grammatical tense and person are added, as nina kata I cut. Here ni means I and now indicates a specific time. Verb conjugation. I am cutting. This sentence can be modified either by changing the subject prefix or the tense prefix, for example. You are cutting. You have cut, the animate human subject and object prefixes, with the m/y in the third person, is. In standard Swahili, 2pl and 3pl objects are both one. However, in Nairobi Swahili, 2pl is mu. The most common tense prefixes are. The indefinite prefix is used for generic statements such as birds fly, and the vowels of the subject prefixes are assimilated. Thus, nasama means I read, although colloquially it is also short for nanasama. I read. You read, conditional. Ni ki nyunmanyama yan gomsoko ni ta pika leo. If I buy cow meat at the market, I'll cook it today. The English conjunction if is translated by ki. A third prefix is the object prefix. It is placed just before the root and refers a particular object, either a person, or rather is the dos in English. He see, ing, him her. I see, ing, the child. The a suffix listed by dictionaries is the positive indicative mood. Other forms occur with negation and the subjunctive, as in seisomi. I'm not reading / I don't read. Other instances of this change of the final vowel include the subjunctive in e. This goes only for Bantu verbs ending with a. Arabic-derived verbs do not change their final vowel. Other suffixes are placed before the end vowel, such as the applicative I and passive w. They are being hit, concord. Swahili phrases agree with nouns in a system of concord, though if the noun refers to a human, they accord with noun classes 1 and 2 regardless of noun class. Verbs agree with the noun class of their subjects and objects. Adjectives, prepositions, and demonstratives agree with the noun class of their nouns. In Standard Swahili, which was based on the dialect spoken in Zanzibar, the system is rather complex. However, it is drastically simplified in many local variants where Swahili is not the native language, such as in Nairobi. In places where Standard Swahili is not commonly used, concord reflects only animacy. Human subjects and objects trigger a, wa and m, wa in verbal concord, while non-human subjects and objects of whatever class trigger I, xi, and infinitive verbs vary between standard ku and reduced I. In Standard Swahili, human subjects and objects of whatever class trigger animacy concord in a, wa and m, wak, while non-human subjects and objects trigger a variety of gender concord prefixes. Most Swahili adjectives begin with either a consonant or the vowels I or e, which are listed separately above. The few adjectives which begin with other vowels do not agree with all noun classes, since some are restricted to humans. NC1M, W, is MW before A and O, and reduces to M before U. Wa does not change. And ki, vi, me becomes CH, V, my before O but not before U, manana, or nana gentle, nwaroro, waroro, myororo, choro, viororo mild, yielding, mum, wom, cum, view male. In a few verbs, kwenda, kwaisha, dialects of Swahili and languages closely related to Swahili, this list is based on Nurse, Derek, and Hinibash, Thomas J. Swahili and Sabaki, A Linguistic History. Dialects of Swahili, Modern Standard Swahili is based on Kiunguja, the dialect spoken in Zanzibar town. There are numerous dialects of Swahili, some of which are mutually unintelligible, including the following. Old dialects, Miho considers the following to be distinct languages: Kimani spoken in the Karimba Islands and northern coastal Mozambique. Kimwayani is spoken by the ethnic minorities in and around the town of Barawa on the southern coast of Somalia. Kibaduni, spoken by the Bajuni minority ethnic group on the coast and islands on both sides of the Somalia-Euro-Kenyan border and in the Bajuni Islands. Also called Kaitiku and Kigunaya. Sakatra Swahili, Sidi, in Gujarat. The rest of the dialects he divides into two groups: Mombasa Euro-Lamu Swahili, Lamu, Kiamu, spoken in and around the island of Lamu. Kaipate, local dialect of Pate Island, considered to be closest to the original dialect of Kingazi. Kingazi, an ancient dialect spoken on the Indian Ocean coast between Lamu and Somalia, sometimes still used in poetry. It is often considered the source of Swahili. Mombasa, Shidlimvu, subdialect of the Mombasa area. Kimvita, the major dialect of Mombasa, the other major dialect alongside Kiunguja. Kiinga, subdialect of the Mombasa area. Karima, spoken around Pangani, Vanga, Dar es Salaam, Rufiji and Mafia Island. Kiunguja, spoken in Zanzibar city and environs on Unguja Island. Kitumchi dialects occupy the bulk of the island. Mambrui, Malindi, Chichafandi, dialect of the southern Kenya coast. Chwaka, Kivamba, dialect of the southern Kenya coast. Nosbi. Pemba Swahili, Kipemba, local dialect of the Pemba Island. Kitumchu and Kimakunduchi, the countryside dialects of the island of Zanzibar. Kimakunduchi is a recent renaming of Kahadamu. The old name means surf, hence it is considered pejorative. Makunduchi, Mafia, Mbwera, Kilwa, Kimgay, formerly spoken around Kilwa district and to the south. Maho includes the various Comorian dialects as a third group. Other authorities consider Comorian to be a Sabaki language distinct from Swahili. Historically recent varieties, Kingwanai, spoken in the eastern and southern regions of the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Shiba Swahili. Sometimes called Copperbelt Swahili. Sheng, a street patois that blends Swahili, English, and ethnic languages spoken in and around Nairobi. Sheng originated in the Nairobi slums and is considered fashionable and cosmopolitan among a growing segment of the population. ENGSH, Asian Swahili and Kuchi Swahili, Kaistla, Kaikia, other regions, in Somalia, where the Afro-Asiatic Somali language predominates, a variant of Swahili referred to as Kamwayanai is spoken along the Benadir coast by the Bravanese people. Another Swahili dialect known as Kai Bajuni also serves as the mother tongue of the Bajuni minority ethnic group, the latter of whom inhabit the tiny Bajuni Islands as well as the southern Kismayo region. In Oman, an estimated 22,000 people speak Swahili. Most are descendants of those who repatriated after the fall of the Sultanate of Zanzibar. See also: Mandum script, Swahili literature, UCLA Language Materials Project, Notes. References: Ashton, E.O. Swahili Grammar, including intonation. Longman House. Essex 1947. ISBN 0-582-62701-X. E. Real, Alveolar and Biodungifo. The Oxford Encyclopedia of African Thought, Volume 1. Oxford University Press US. New York City 2010. ISBN 0-19-533473-6, Blomert, Jan, Situating Language Rights, English and Swahili in Tanzania Revisited Working Papers in Urban Language and Literacies, Paper 23, University of Ghent 2003, Brock Houghton, Birgit. Education for All in whose language? Oxford Review of Education 27, 115 134 doi, 10.1080/03054980125577 Kyragdin, Shibuddin and Matthias E. Nyampala. Historia ya Kiswahili. Oxford University Press. Eastern Africa. 1977. ISBN 0-19-572367-8, Contini Morava, Ellen. Noun Classification in Swahili 1994. Lambert, H.E. 1956. Chichifundi, a dialect of the southern Kenya coast. Lambert, H.E. 1957. Kivumba, a dialect of the southern Kenya coast. Lambert, H.E. 1958. Chijambu and Kiunga, subdialects of the Mombasa area. Marshad, Hassan A. Kiswahili or Kiingereza. Jomo Kenyatta Foundation. Nairobi 1993. ISBN 9966-22-098-4. Nurse, Derek, Antony Bosch, Thomas J. Swahili and Sabaki, A Linguistic History. 1993. Series, University of California Publications in Linguistics, v. 121. Urdichi, Nathan Oyori, On Language Rights in Kenya, in Nordic Journal of African Studies 12, 3, 277 295, Prines, A.H.J. 1961. The Swahili-speaking peoples of Zanzibar and the East African coast. Ethnographic Survey of Africa, edited by Darrell Ford. London, International African Institute. Prines, A.H.J. 1970. A Swahili Nautical Dictionary. Preliminary Studies in Swahili Lexicon Euro 1. Dar es Salaam. Whiteley, Wilfred 1969. Swahili, The Rise of a National Language. London, Methuen. Series, Studies in African History. External links, visit LLMAP link for more information on Swahili, UCLA Report on Swahili, Foreign Service Institute Swahili course and audios, Pan-African localization page on Swahili, Swahili yesterday, today and tomorrow, factors of its development and expansion, list of Swahili dictionaries.